Right, good morning, everybody. It's 10 o'clock and welcome to the Thirsk and Malton Area Constituency Area Committee Planning meeting dated the 15th of August. I've just got a few housekeeping things that we need to go through. Members of the public are entitled to attend this meeting as observers for all those items taken in open session. Please note the meeting is being recorded. If you wish to record the meeting yourself, then please give due regard to the Council's protocol on audio-visual recording and photography at public meetings. I'd also like to remind members and officers to speak clearly and audibly when addressing the meeting. If the fire alarm sounds, please exit the chamber by the emergency exits located at the entrance and to the rear of the chamber and congregate in the visitors' car park. And ladies and gents' toilets are located in the entrance corridor. So that's the housekeeping. Nikki, do we have apologies for absence, please?
Yes, Chair, we have apologies from Councillor Joy Andrews and Councillor Malcolm Taylor.
As the minutes are attached from the meeting of the 18th of July, is everybody happy with those minutes? Councillor Jabot.
Yes, just to highlight that I'm subbing for Councillor Malcolm Taylor.
Minutes, sorry, is everybody... You.
I'll second those.
Thank you. Can we just do a quick vote? Right, thank you. Declarations of interest. Thank you.
I, like a lot of councillors, probably have had some communication with respect to item 4. I had some lobbying at the first item. First. Thank you.
Anyone else? I've obviously had quite a bit of I've had conversations about item 4, item 6 and items 7 and 8. They are personal, non-prejudicial and non-pecuniary. So I'm going to now move on to the main part of the agenda, which is the items for determination. Item 4 is ZF24/00511/FL, demolition of existing sports hall and erection of 4 number holiday lets and conversion and existing leisure centre buildings to create 5 number holiday lets with associated hard and soft landscaping at Hunmanby Hall Sports and Leisure, Hall Park Road, Hunmanby, Filey, North Yorkshire. Yankee Oscar 4140HZ. We do have speakers on this item. We have the applicant's agent and the division member. So I'm going to pass this over to the officers now. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you, Chair, and good morning, everyone. As mentioned, the application is for the demolition of the existing sports hall and the redevelopment of the site for 9 holiday lets. This is the erection of a replacement building housing 4 holiday lets and the conversion of the existing gym building to accommodate 5 holiday lets. The application site refers to an area within the former grounds of Hunmanby Hall, which is a Grade 2 star listed building. Specifically, the application site refers to an area to the southwest of the hall, with the site containing the former sports hall, a gym leisure building, and an existing holiday let. Access into the site is from Hall Park Road to the south of the sports hall, leading to a parking area. Next slide, please. Looking at the wider site, Hunmanby Hall is located approximately 500 metres to the west of the main village, which is visible as a larger settlement on the right-hand side of the image on screen now. Next slide, please. The existing site is somewhat visually dominated by the sports hall. This is a large flat roof structure with timber cladding, which is directly adjacent to Hall Park Road. The existing access is visible on the right-hand side of the screen now. Next slide, please. These are further images of the sports hall from Hall Park Road, looking southwards. The existing holiday let is attached to the northern side of the sports hall, visible on the left-hand side of the left-hand side image on the screen now. The left-hand side image shows the entrance of the existing gym building, which is from the western face. Sorry, wrong slide. The left-hand side of the image shows the entrance into the sports hall, which is the north-eastern corner. On the right-hand side is the existing holiday let, which is also accessed from the eastern facing elevation, forming somewhat of a courtyard. Next slide, please. On the left-hand side is the existing gym building with the entrance facing west. The right-hand side image is showing the adjacent residential properties. Next slide, please. Yeah, sorry. The Grade 2 style listed Humberby Hall is located to the north of the site. This is a separate access to the application site, which leads to a courtyard, which is currently used for parking. Next slide, please. To further explain the proposal, as mentioned, it is for the redevelopment of the site for 9 holiday lets. The sports hall is to be replaced by a single terrace row, 1.5 stories, housing 4 holiday lets. The gym building is to be retained and converted to 5 holiday lets. All of the accommodation in this building is at ground floor level. The frontages of the 2 buildings face onto each other with no outward facing windows, excluding roof lights. This forms somewhat of a courtyard with individual soft landscaping formed for the individual holiday lets. Next slide, please. The replacement building will provide holiday accommodation for four 2-bedroom holiday lets set over 1.5 stories. The rear elevation facing onto Hall Park Road will be blank, excluding the roof lights, and will be built from red brick and a panel roof. Next slide, please. The converted building will provide accommodation for 5 holiday lets, 4 of which will be 1-bedroomed. Plot 9 is 2-bedroomed. All of this accommodation is on the ground floor level, with external alterations proposed to the frontage in terms of opening details, which will be provided through a condition. Next slide, please. This is a image showing the reduction in scale from the existing sports hall, which measures approximately 850 square meters, to the replacement building, which is about 350 square meters. Next slide, please. The vehicle access into the site remains to the south of the proposed replacement building via Hall Park Road. The access will be slightly widened to improve visibility in both north and south facing directions. 3 additional parking spaces will be proposed, 1 accessible space, and a cycle store will be proposed as well. A tree planting scheme is also proposed, showing the planting of 5 individual trees and 6 tree groups. The application was preceded by a tree works application, which sought to remove trees, hence the replanting scheme. However, there are no trees to be removed as part of this application. Slide, please. In terms of the assessment, the application needs to be assessed against several important local plan policies. This includes HC8, which is the protection of community facilities, given that it seeks to remove a sports venue and leisure facilities, which is a community facility. EMVQ6, which is relation to development in the countryside, the application falling outside of the development limits of Scarborough Borough. TOU4, which relates to tourist accommodation in the countryside, and TOU1, which is a general condition supporting and encouraging the diversification of tourist accommodation in the area. Given that it represents a loss of community facilities, the application needs to be protected through HC8 unless one or more criteria can be met to justify its loss. The applicant has presented a case which seeks to justify against point A of policy HC8, which outlines that the site has been marketed for a period of 17 months. and that the facilities were used to a limited degree beforehand. There is no outline period within policy HC8 which justifies the loss of such facilities, although a marketing period of 17 months is generally seen as appropriate given this context within a rural area. In relation to policy EMVQ6, development should be significantly restrained given it's a countryside location, although tourist accommodation is specifically allowed within this policy, subject to it being of an appropriate scale in that location, visually unobtrusive, and can be successfully integrated into the surrounding landscape. In relation to assessment against TOU4 in EMVQ6, the application seeks to reuse a brownfield site. The replacement building is of a smaller scale compared to the removed sports hall, and whilst it can't be considered to be visually unobtrusive, it is considered to be an improvement compared to the existing building in terms of design and appearance. It's of a smaller scale, its footprint is smaller, its height is smaller, and the existing uses on site are also untypical uses found in a countryside location, and are considered to be typical town centre uses. Therefore, the redevelopment of the site for a less visually unobtrusive development is considered to be appropriate in the countryside. In relation to TOU1, this generally encourages and supports the diversification of the tourism offering, which plays a vital role in the borough's economy. The main physical change on site is the removal of a sports hall, which has no historical importance and currently has at best a neutral impact on the character of the area. It should also be noted that the application is a resubmission of a previously withdrawn application from last year. The Conservation Officer objected to this proposal based on the scale of the proposal, which has now been reduced from 14 units to 9 units, is of a smaller scale and has a layout which is more suitable to the historic environment. The layout also retains the solid blank gable wall on Hall Park Road, which encloses the site and retains the courtyard setting. And the impact on the setting of the conservation area, the listed building and the scheduled ancient monument to the north of the site is considered to be neutral. Again, access into the site is to remain as existing, yet improved with additional parking spaces. There's been no objection raised from highways, and no internal or external consultees has objected to the scheme, several of which have requested further information, which has been covered through planning conditions. It is therefore recommended that the application is in compliance with relevant local plan policies, and it is recommended that the application is permitted subject to conditions. Chair.
Thank you very much. We've got two speakers, and forgive me, I should have explained. Councillor Donoghue Moncrief, who is the division member, is joining us via Teams this morning. She couldn't be here in person. So I'm going to ask Councillor Donoghue Moncrief to speak first, and then speaker is Mr. Morton Schmidt-Hans, and I'll ask you to speak when we finish. So Michelle, you've got three minutes.
Yep. Thank you, Madam Chairman, and good morning to the committee. I'll just make some very brief points because obviously I called this in initially. It was going to be a delegated decision. However, I wasn't informed that the call-in had been accepted, and I wasn't given prior notice of the meeting, which obviously I think you're aware of. But I'm deeply disappointed that that's happened because I haven't had adequate chance to prepare for this meeting today. I just want to make a couple of quick points. Firstly, this is probably the most sensitive site in Hummonby, but not just in Hummonby, but actually in Hummonby and the wider area. It has traditionally been the most difficult site to develop. It has most traditionally been the site that any enforcement issues have been acted on more quickly than any other. And I think there's deep sensitivity and worry about what is going to occur on this site going forward. This hasn't been held, and that the developer or their agent hasn't once attempted to engage with myself or indeed the parish council or the community, even though there are people who will be living within yards of this site. And I think that is completely and utterly unacceptable, and that should not have happened. This is a very, very sensitive historic site. It is as I understand it, certainly by an ancient monument, and it's certainly near the historic castle and the moat, and obviously the hall. So 2 points I would just like to make is, I don't feel that the photos shown to you by the officer present the whole context of the site. And the reason I say that is that the original application, certainly the conservation officer, looked at the whole site as a whole, which included the parkland. Yet today you've been presented just a bit of the site. That was not how planning approached this originally. And I would respectfully suggest that it would be helpful perhaps to the committee if they were to come on a site visit, just to have a look around, because it is a strange site. It is right in the centre of the village, but yet you have open parkland close, and I think it would benefit. I don't think the photographs you've been shown show you the whole site in context. And given that the developer in the original planning application said that this was the first phase of the work they're doing, what you may well give permission for now has impact on the future of the whole site. And this is a very sensitive site. Just on the issue of the 17 months marketing, what actually happened with this site was that it was being marketed during the Scarborough Council's. Sorry, is everything okay? Yeah. Have I exceeded my time? I can't hear you. I can't hear you. Sorry, Caroline.
Sorry, do you want to finish off, Michelle, quickly?
Yeah, just 1 point. Yeah, just on the issue about the marketing of the site. This site suddenly was put forward for housing during the Scarborough Council's local plan review, and suddenly it started going down a completely different direction. So I think the argument that it has been marketed unsuccessfully is disputed, not just by myself, but by many other individuals in the community. And I'll leave it there. Thank you, Chairman.
Thanks, Michelle. The next speaker is Mr. Schmidt-Hans. Do come forward, Mr. Schmidt-Hans. You have 3 minutes, and we'll try and put the clock on. Thanks very much.
Good morning. We are pleased that the application has the support of planning officers and officers dealing with heritage, highways, archaeology, environmental health and drainage. Last year, we submitted a similar application for 14 holiday homes. Following comments from the heritage and planning officers, we withdrew the application and redesigned it. We are pleased to have now gained support on this new application. The sports hall and gym were underused and marketed for 1.5 years with no interest from people who wanted to run the premises as before. Sports halls are facilities for towns, so it is understandable why there is little interest in keeping it going. We hope to develop 9 holiday homes with this application. The next stage will be to refurbish and open the tennis courts and dog walking track along with the bowls green. These facilities will be open to local people as well as holiday makers. This will be done when the holiday homes are being built and will need another planning application. Getting consent for these holiday homes is key to making that happen. The sports hall was built for a former school and is a prominent and unattractive building on Hall Park Road. The building is within a conservation area and is near to listed buildings. We consider that the sports hall's replacement with a more modest 1.5-storey terrace of 4 holiday homes will be much less visible and will enhance the character of the area. The trees on site are being managed with poor trees being removed and new trees being planted. The site is a sustainably located brownfield area which is close to the facilities in the centre of Hummonby. Highways officers thought that the site was a long walk from the facilities, however it is only 650 metres to the facilities along a footpath. This is closer to the central facilities than many existing homes in Hummonby. It is also closer to a good range of facilities than many recently built holiday homes in the area. Some local people objected to the loss of facilities, however it is intended to open the dog walking and tennis courts once the holiday homes are open. Highways officers are happy with the vehicular access and there is no record of accidents on Hall Park Road. Some people want residential homes to be built, however planning policy does not support this. 9 small holiday homes will not cause noise or disturbance compared to a gym which would have opened early and late in the day. The next stage for the site includes opening the dog walking track and tennis courts and creating bowls green, which will be available for the local people. This development will help deliver that. The terrace of 4 holiday homes, which will replace the sports hall, will improve the character of the area and improve the conservation area and setting of the listed building. The site is empty and needs to be reused. A modest holiday home development will sensibly reuse the brownfield site and complies with planning policy. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much. Councillor Malton.
Thank you, Chairman. Given Councillor Moncrief's comments and other comments that have been received regarding the awareness of the parish council to this application, and given the sensitivity of the site and the fact that the committee has not been offered a site visit, I would like to move that we defer this application.
Sorry, Councillor Burr.
Thank you, Chairman. Yes, I totally agree with that suggestion. I'm privileged to know Hummonby quite well, and I do think that councillors, before they actually do decide to give any permission, just get a view of what this site actually entails and what could happen in the future. So we need to get this right, and we need to get this right for the future. So I will happily second that. So.
Councillor Cross.
Yeah, thank you, Chair. I know this site well. Myself, I drive past it on many occasions going out into the Wolds, and I know Hummonby really well. And I think the big thing missing, as Councillor Napton said, is a site visit. You know what I mean? It is a big site, 41 acres. We need to know what it's all about. We need to look at it. I do know the buildings. I've been down there many times, but I think it would be well worth a site visit, and I will agree with deferment.
Anyone else? Right, I'm going to.
Can I just say I agree with all the comments. I think we defer.
Okay. It's been moved and seconded for deferment pending a site visit by members of this committee. Is everybody happy with that? Okay, thank you. So the item's deferred for a site visit. We will let you know when we can organise that. But thank you very much and thanks for coming. Okay. Thanks, everybody. The next item on the agenda is application number ZB24/001455/full, change of use of land for the siting of 5-number holiday lodges, improvements to existing access and associated infrastructure works at New Lynn, Alston Road, Easingwold. And we do have 2 speakers on this. We have the objector, Mr. Goodrum, and the applicant, Mr. Staddington. So I'm going to ask the officers to present the report, and then I'll ask the speakers to come forward. Thanks. Thank you, Con.
Thank you, Chair. So this application is for 5 holiday lets at New Lynn, Alston Road, Easingwold. It was previously deferred at May's Planning Committee, where the committee sought further information on the following matters: land levels of the site, a site management plan for the site, details of ownership and tenures of the lodges, details of the design of the lodges, street scenes and elevations of the lodges, in particular those in the northwest corner of the site. Since then, we've sought to address these concerns with the applicant, and the following has been submitted: street scenes and levels, a draft site management plan, and details of the ownership and tenures of the lodges. The site is on the northern edge of Easingwold and is considered to be adjacent to the built form of the settlement. The key policy consideration in terms of principle is EG8, which discusses the council's approach to tourist development within the former Hambleton area. The policy displays a preference for sites within or adjacent to existing settlements. The site is within 11 minutes walk to the town centre, with bus services within walking distance and Alston Road forming part of a national and regional cycling route. EG8 also asks that development not unacceptably harm the surrounding area or the amenity of neighbouring properties, which will be discussed later in the presentation. There was an application for housing on the site which was dismissed at appeal in 2016. The dismissal was largely based on the rural character of the site, and as you can see, to the north and east of the site it's distinctly rural in character. Part of the assessment of rural character, or a major part in the assessment of that rural character, was the approach from the north, from Ulston, into Easonwold, and how the site was viewed from that vantage point. Next slide. The site itself is a grass paddock associated with Newland to the south and is currently in domestic use. As you can see from the slide, there's a gradual fall from east to west from the adjacent fields, and that fall is approximately 2 meters across the site. There's a further fall of 1.5 meters between the site and Ulston Road to the west. Slide, sorry. The application is for 5 units, as you can see. The tenure, either short-term or long-term, has not yet been determined, as the applicant intends on selling the site to a developer/site operator. There is no policy basis for fixing a tenure through condition, and both have their advantages in terms and disadvantages in terms of economic benefit. However, both do provide some element of economic benefit. Part of the proposal is to alter the existing access to be shared with Newlyn, extending it to a width of 8.9 meters to allow for greater visibility. Highways have not objected and have provided a series of conditions to ensure that the proposal will not harm highway safety. The nearest properties to the site are number 2 Lime Tree Avenue and number 4 Tower Croft, approximately 25 meters and 29 meters respectively from the site boundary. The 32.1 meters that you can see here represents the closest point between a lodge and a neighbouring property. Environmental Health have not objected, but instead have pointed out that the potential for harm does exist, but that it could be managed by a series of conditions. One of these conditions relates to a site management plan, a draft version of which has been supplied following the deferral. Environmental Health have been consulted on this draft and have offered feedback which the applicant has been encouraged to bear in mind when submitting the final plan in order to discharge any condition. The site is currently well screened from Ulston Road. However, as part of the scheme, landscaping will be provided both within the site and also to the northern, eastern and southern boundaries of the site. Whilst the western boundary is currently well established, a large proportion of the existing planting is ash and so is liable to dieback. This has been addressed by conditions requiring the protection of existing planting, replacement planting for existing plants within 5 years of the permission. A condition relating to the lighting of the site has also been included. Next slide. This is a series of site sections and the street scene showing the existing site. The middle image shows the relationship of the site with 4 Tower Croft on the left. The lower image shows the street scene from Ulston Road. Next slide. This recreates the previous slide, but shows the impact of the proposed development, including the extent of the proposed cut and fill, which is minimal. As you can see, the existing planting along the western boundary of the site mitigates a good deal of the visual impact from the development. Next slide, sorry. Due to the fall of the land, the fields to the east drain through the site and onto the road. Yorkshire Water have asked for a condition to be attached relating to the connection to their system. The applicant has provided details of a percolation test showing that drainage, sustainable drainage is not viable within the site, and it's therefore considered that Yorkshire Water are likely to take that evidence on board and allow drainage into their systems. Due to the land levels on both sides of the road, Ulston Road gains quite a lot of surface water during wet weather. It is considered that dealing with this in its entirety is outside the scope of this application. The drainage scheme you can see on the slide is considered to deal adequately with the impact that the development will have on the drainage of the site, and it will not make the current situation worse. Next slide, sir. This slide shows the proposed elevations and floor plans of the lodges. They will be approximately 69 meters squared in size and approximately 4.25 meters to the ridge. They will be timber clad with grey profiled roof tile. The external finish of the timber will be managed by a condition. Next slide, sorry. And so these are just examples of the proposed finishes that could form part of the elevation. Next slide, sorry. So here you can see the existing land levels, including the pronounced east to west slope. Slide. You can see the northern and eastern site boundaries here, both of which are to be planted up. This is a portion of the western boundary of the site towards the southern boundary, showing the relationship with Claypenny Estate. This Slide shows the view towards the countryside and the public right of way, which runs approximately 100 to 270 metres to the east. This one shows the current access and the rows of landscape on each side of Ulston Road, as well as some surface water. This shows the view from the public right of way to the east of the site. With Newlyn featured so prominently, the site will not appear to be wholly isolated. Just off the screen, unfortunately, I didn't get a photograph of this, but to the left is a wide vista of Easenwald, which further contextualises the site's position adjacent to the built form. If landscaped, you can see that it'll fit into the planted landscape behind without sticking out, as it might do if it was located in the open countryside. Sorry. So this is the view from the north. As I said, it was identified as being of some importance by the inspector. This is to be planted up, which will help to limit that impact. And this is a view from further along the public right-of-way, showing that wide-ranging views of the site from that public right-of-way are limited by the local topography. You obviously can't see through hills. As a result of the previous discussion, it is recommended that the application is approved, subject to conditions. Thank you.
Would Mr. Goodrum please come and have a seat? Good morning. It's the green button on your microphone pad, and you've got 3 minutes, Mr. Goodrum. I will give you a warning when you've got 30 seconds left. Thank you.
Deferring this application, the committee set out clear, specific details of the information required. The response is unsatisfactory. For example, there are no measurements to show the land levels and the extent of cutting and filling needed. This is a site on clay. The street scene proposed doesn't depict the elevations clearly and appears not to be proportionate. It appears inaccurate, showing the land rising through 4 Tower Croft. Actually, the land is lower than the lodges. Which lodges are proposed? No new details are provided. The management plan is vague, not addressing the points raised in 2 reports from Environmental Health, with no further written report provided. The Hambleton plan is clear. Tourist accommodation will only be supported where it is demonstrated there is no unacceptable harm to the character, appearance or amenity or the living conditions of neighbours. 28 local objectors think this has not been demonstrated. In 2016, the 2016 appeal is relevant. It decided the then proposed development, quotes, would profoundly alter the rural character on the site, close quotes. Significant negative weighting was given to social and environmental factors. This proposal is for a business, radically changing the character of the location. The impact is substantial. 20 plus holiday makers, possibly outside until 11 p.m, potentially changing weekly on the most elevated site in Easenwald, with 5 lodges, each 14 feet high. A high turnover, high occupancy holiday site beside a low density, low occupancy, quiet residential site. Both committee reports confirm, quotes, holiday lodges are not generally found within residential areas and would be at odds with the residential character of Copper Clay Estate. This is not overcome by yet more conditions or the caveats referred to. Among other things, noise travels demonstrated by previous concerns, and trees die or lose their leaves. The economic benefit is marginal. No direct evidence of the nature and extent of the contribution is available. The 2016 appeal assessed the economic impact of 4 4-bedroomed houses as of, quotes, limited positive weight, close quotes. The level of occupancy proposed then and now is very similar. The harm outweighs the limited economic benefit. Accordingly, the policy does not support this development. It's not tourism at any price. Please refuse this application. Thank you.
I invite Mr. Saddington to come forward, please. Mr Staddington, you've got 3 minutes for your presentation. If you press the green button at the bottom on the microphone, light up and you're ready on, isn't it?
Yeah, great. Good morning, everyone. I'm speaking in support of the application today. As you know, the application was deferred at the May Committee to allow for the submission of further information in relation to site levels, site management, and the tenure of the proposed lodges. We've responded by providing as much information as possible to the satisfaction of your officers, and their recommendation continues to be that of approval. Section 3 of the committee report provides a summary of the additional information provided. The draft site management plan is arguably the most significant piece of additional information and provides a framework to impose suitable controls over visitors, hours of operation, noise and outdoor use. We recently provided further clarification on the scope of the site management plan in response to your environmental health officers' comments, again to the satisfaction of your officers. In terms of the principle of development, the proposal complies with policy EG8 of the local plan, which places an importance on finding sites for holiday accommodation within or adjacent to settlements and in locations with access to local services and public transport. Prior to applying for planning permission, Mr and Mrs Haitley, the applicants, received confirmation from the Freedom Camping and Caravan Club that they would grant a site licence for 5 touring caravans. This option remains open to the applicants, but their preference is to develop a much more aesthetically pleasing holiday lodge site. The current planning application provides the council with an opportunity to impose conditions and deliver planning benefits, such as enhanced landscaping, whereas little or no control can be exerted by the council in relation to the caravan site licence. I should add that some of the neighbouring objections refer to the site's planning history and refusal of permission for 2-storey housing as a reason to oppose the current scheme. However, this decision was taken by Hambleton District Council many years ago for a significantly different development, applying very different planning policies at the time. Referring back to that site history is somewhat immaterial and misleading. With regards to drainage, a percolation test has been carried out and confirms that the site isn't suitable for soakaways. Therefore, surface water would be attenuated and drained into Yorkshire Water system. A drainage channel or French drain would be installed at the site entrance to intercept flows. The site's very well screened and further landscaping is proposed between the lodges. The lodges have been deliberately sited to avoid any impact on the trees, and we do anticipate that the site will operate as a quiet and peaceful environment. Many thanks for your time. I do hope you'll support the application.
Thank you very much. Right, I will open it up to questions. Councillor Napton.
Yes, just a question regarding the tenure. I appreciate that we cannot impose a planning condition regarding the tenure, but I just wanted to understand those types of tenure. So the short tenure, completely understand that. The long tenure, so when a property would be sold or long-term leased outright to one person, what are the restrictions regarding the number of months that they can occupy that that lodge? I've got 11 months in my mind. I don't know, is that right? Because I'm just what I'm trying to tease out is, could these lodges be lived in permanently by residents? Thank you, Chairman.
Thanks. That's going to be conditioned by, it's going to be controlled, sorry, by condition 19, which states that holiday accommodation is occupied for holiday purposes only, shall not be occupied as a person's sole or main place of residence. So that would, you'd imagine that put a bar on spending 11 months in a specific place. It contains the sentence, for the avoidance of doubt, this decision does not permit the use of the property as a dwelling house. So it's relatively strong on there and preventing that.
So if that occupancy was to be 12 months, who would be controlling that, in the sense of who would evict them from that property? You know, what is the sanction? It's all very well putting that condition in, but who would actually enforce that, and who would actually evict them from that property?
Thank you, Councillor. We've come across this situation a few times in planning enforcement, and we've gone back to this condition, and we've asked operators and people that own properties on the sites to provide evidence that they have another home, that they live in that other home, council tax bills, correspondence, etc. And if it was a situation whereby that evidence couldn't be produced, we would then consider for the expediency of taking formal enforcement action if the condition was breached. And we would look at each case on its own merit in regard to the circumstances of the person, and the evidence that they produced, how they were using the property, why. And we, at the end of the day, we would consider the specific harm from that particular person and that particular breach in every single case. It's not to say that everybody would be evicted, but it's not to say that because that might be an end point, that we wouldn't do it. It would be a case of reviewing the circumstances in each particular case. But in terms of your question in relation to who would enforce that, it would be the council's enforcement team in relation to a breach of that particular condition.
It's worth mentioning that within that same condition, there's a section that allows us to request details of who's staying there, for how long, etc., etc., at all reasonable times. So if there are any concerns regarding the occupation of the site, all it takes really is someone to refer it back to us, and then we can investigate that using that condition.
Councillor Baker.
Thank you, Chair. As relatively new to this planning committee, I'd like to ask, in your summing up, Connor, you said that the plan was to sell this to developers, so the applicant isn't actually going to be hands-on with producing the lodges, etc., and running them. So can I just ask, what controls have we over the conditions? Do the developers who aren't present at this process, and we don't know who they are, do they have to abide by the conditions? And more importantly, can they come back at that point and ask for them to be removed?
So the conditions go with the permission rather than with the applicant. They can do. That's in anyone who's received planning permissions gift to, their right, rather, to ask to vary or remove conditions. But that again is a planning. It's a planning application, and particularly with variation or removal of conditions, that's something that goes back out into the public domain. Would be available for discussion at committee if that was required, or if it was felt to be required.
Questions? No. So I'm going to open it up for debate. I'm going to go to the local member, which is Councillor Napton. Councillor Napton, it's yours to discuss.
Thank you very much, Chairman. So I think we just come back to this 2016 decision of the inspector, who said the reason for, one of the main reasons for dismissal was the rural nature of this site, and nothing has changed. Nothing has changed. The inspector considered that, and in their opinion, this site was not right for development because of its rural nature. Nothing has changed. So we should take that into account. I'm concerned about the tenure. I've seen these cases in the past. It's very difficult to enforce. And if we come to enforcement and we come to the management plan is very weak, very weak. Given the applicants had another 2 months to firm this up, you know, how is this going to be done? Is it going to be delivered by a limited company? How is this going to do moving forward? There's so many questions. And then we come to the lodges. How is it beyond the wit of man to actually tell us which lodges it's going to be, which specific model? How is this so difficult when you're planning a development? You know, all of these things are lacking in the responses. When we come to Hambleton policy EG8 regarding the tourism, you come back to this unacceptable harm, and it does not reach the threshold, in my opinion, to that the tourism benefits of this site outweigh the damage which was clearly identified by the inspector in 2016. And then a strange thing, and I'm sure this isn't Mr. Saddington himself and that it's under the instructions of his client, the threat of a CL site. I find that very disturbing. This committee has been threatened that if we don't approve this application, that basically, well, you'll get a worse situation with towing caravans and a CL. I find that very disturbing. Sure, it's not Mr. Saddington. Sure, it's an instruction from his client. So with all that in mind, I would like to move that we refuse this application, Chairman.
Thank you very much. Councillor Burr.
Thank you, Chairman. In principle, I support lodges. I think that they can be a great benefit to not only the people who use lodges, but to environments. However, after going and visiting the site, is this site really, really appropriate? Sometimes lodges can have 2 turnovers in 1 week, a 4-stay and a 3-stay. And you know, the traffic there has to be considered. As said, holiday lodges are hugely beneficial and many people use them. But personally, I don't think that this is in the right place. So I will not be supporting this application, and it's actually been moved, so I would second that.
Councillor Bates.
I'm not at all happy with lots of things to do with this application. It's basically, we were told we're going to hand it over to some developers. We don't know what they're going to look like, the lodges. We did ask for that information. Instead, we got some 3 or 4, this is what the cladding's going to look like. You know, as we all know, there are different styles of lodges. I know you did actually show us some and there was some talk about it, but it's very, very vague. I'm not convinced that there will be some groundworks to make it level and to alter the configuration of the site because of the slope on the site. And again, it's on the edge. It's a rural site, but it will have impact on the neighbouring properties. So I agree with Councillor Burr. I don't disagree with lodges. I think they're a wonderful thing and they bring economy into the countryside, but it is the wrong site, I feel.
Yes, Conor.
Sorry, so I've unhelpfully labelled it slide 9, which I don't think it is, but we did have some proposed elevations on there, which showed, you know, what they'll look like.
Any Councillor Jabot.
Thank you, Chair. Most of the points I was going to highlight have already been touched on by my colleagues. My concerns, enforcement, the rurality and the nature of this, the inspection of 2016. So therefore, I would be voting to support the refusal of this application.
Anyone else? Okay, so the application has been moved and seconded for refusal. If you are all happy with that recommendation, will you please indicate whether you support or not? Okay. Now so that's 6 against. So thank you. Sorry, the committee has decided against that. And can we get the reasons for refusal?
Yes. Could I note the reasons for refusal on this?
Yeah, so. Yep, so I think coming back to what the inspector said in 2016, the rural nature of the site, nothing has changed there. That I don't think it reaches the threshold EG8 that it would cause unacceptable harm within that rural area. And I think that the lack of clarity around the management plan and how that will be carried forward with the developer and the issues regarding environmental health as well, I don't think have been fully addressed. I could say about the tenure and the enforcement of the tenure and the fact that we're not even being given the actual model of each of the lodges, but I think they're probably lesser things than the fundamental rural nature of this site as decided by the inspector in 2016. And I will say that I am not in favour of lodges. I like lodges, and when they're suitably sited, they are a great asset to the economic development of any town. And I'd welcome some lodges in Easingwold in an appropriate location.
Thank you very much. Please don't feel you've got to stay for the rest of the meeting. I understand if you want to go. Right, ladies and gentlemen, item 6 on the agenda, application ZE23/01660/M full, change of use of agricultural and equestrian land to allow the siting of 24 number holiday lodges, 1 Warden's Lodge with associated access. And I miss out the reception shop because I think that's gone. Yeah. Just the reception area, parking, infrastructure and landscaping. And this is a revised detail to planning approval 20/00701 M full dated 15/11/2021 at land off Dasket Hill, Sheriff Hutton. It should be noted that we do have 2 speakers on this application, and I'll pass over to Neve for presentation. Thank you very much, everybody.
Thank you, Chair. Sorry, can you hear me okay? Yeah, great. So as you're aware, the application Sheriff Hutton seeks permission for the siting of 24 2- and 3-bedroom holiday lodges, and this was reduced down from the originally proposed 32. As noted, this is together with a warden's lodge to house a permanent on-site management presence and a reception building. This is a site where we've granted permission for 16 quite significantly larger holiday units in 2021. This scheme also seeks approval for the associated access, parking, infrastructure and landscaping. I would note that the 2021 application, it can be enacted at any point. I'd previously brought this application to committee in May 2024 with a recommendation for approval, and members had a very useful site visit. At that point, we sought deferral of the item due to the originally proposed holiday units no longer being available to the applicant. We wish them to provide updated plans with accurate unit types to secure the appearance of the units for full consideration prior to the decision being made due to the site-specific circumstances. So as you'll be aware, the proposal would now include 4 types of holiday lodges. There's 2 different 2-bed styles and 2 different 3-bed styles. All of these will be constructed with timber-coloured composite cladding and dark UPVC windows and doors, together with a dark metro tile roof. Each would have a commensurately sized outdoor decking area and 2 parking spaces. The design now incorporates pitched roof forms with an eaves height of 2.9 metres and a maximum height of 4.15 metres, which is lower than the originally approved scheme. The amended unit types are found to be pretty much commensurate with the types that we'd first seen as part of this application, and full re-advertisement has been undertaken as well, and the amended unit types outlined and discussed in the committee report. I was also able to send a precise specification of the material types from an example unit within the late pages for members, and this could be controlled via condition. Another change at this point is that the controversial shop element within the reception building has been removed, and this was clearly outlined within the documents being re-advertised, but I do apologise for the reference to that within the agenda. You just hadn't updated it. As part of the amended report, I was able to sort of fully summarise the further responses that were received following the publication of the May report. And following this, where appropriate, I've been able to respond to various points for clarification. Since the publication of the most recent late pages in August, there's just been one additional letter of consultation from a Mr. O'Neill, and I've printed that for members, including my detailed response to that. And there also is further helpful information from the Planning Policy Manager just to clarify on certain points for the avoidance of any doubt. So I'd be grateful if members have had a chance to review this. So I will just move on to the presentation. We have an aerial map here, and it shows the sort of sets the scene really. It's an agricultural field outside of village development limits, and it spans approximately 144 metres from north to south and 115 metres from east to west, totaling approximately 166 hectares. We are to the north of Sheriff Hutton, and we're within walking distance of the shop, the cafe and the public house. Dasket Hill is to the east. You can see that just labelled there, and Cornborough Road is to the south, and that incorporates residential properties to the south of the highway. The Howardian Hills National Landscape Area, formerly our AONB, is located approximately 3.6 kilometres to the north, and the site falls entirely within flood zone 1. As you'll be able to potentially appreciate better from the photographs and from the site visit, the site's really well landscaped along the eastern and southern boundaries, with a well-maintained hedge and a line of mature trees. To the western boundary, and we'll go back to this in a second, there is a mature field hedge present with intermittent trees. To the north, there's a line of tree planting with some gaps, and yeah, again, we'll come back to that. I would just say at this point, the site's located at a significant distance from the village conservation area boundary, which is approximately 250 metres to the south, and the scheduled ancient monument of Sheriff Hutton Castle. The site does incorporate ridge and furrow formations, which NYC Archaeology have identified as a non-designated heritage asset. The holiday lodges, and I think we can see this better on the next slide. would be located at a minimum of 21 metres inset from the domestic curtilages of the properties to the south along Cornborough Road. And as noted, we have very mature screening along the southern boundary of the site to be enhanced by an acoustic fence as well. The proposal incorporates the provision of a surface water attenuation pond to the southeast of the site, which you can just see there. And there's a pedestrian link along the southeastern corner to help with permeability. So I will just move to the photographs. So the first photograph is a view of the access from Dasket Hill. And I will go through these quite quickly because I've got quite a lot, but I think it's just the nature of the site's quite large. The next one is a view northwards showing where you can see the 30 mph sign. So it does indicate the site is within that 30 mph limit for all vehicle users. And then we'll just look at this view again, but to the south. And then that's coming up to the roundabout, which links Cornborough Road and Dasket Hill with the village. The next view is a view of the western boundary of the site, and that's where I noted the mature hedge and the intermittent tree planting as well. The next one is the same again, but from a better distant view. And that boundary will also receive supplementary planting as part of the scheme. The next view is a view towards the southern boundary of the site, and that's where the new acoustic fencing would be installed. The next one is a view towards the southern boundary and the eastern boundary, and you can just see the very slight gap where the access is at that point. The next one is another view of the eastern boundary again, and I think it is fair to say that these do all sort of represent the very mature landscape present at this point. So then moving to the next one, that is a view towards the northern boundary of the site at a bit more of a distance from the rear southern point of the site. And you can see there is landscaping along there, but there is a gap that is present. The next one is looking from the north of the site back down towards the south. So it's sort of showing the level nature of it at that point. And the next one is taken from along the northern part of the site, looking further northwards. And that's kind of in the distance, Terrington. So this is where the more sporadic little area of landscaping is sort of missing and would be reinstated, or sorry, instated because it hasn't been there. The next one is actually from beyond the northern boundary, where land levels are falling, and you're looking back towards the site at this point. So again, just seeing where the landscaping would be quite beneficial. And then another view of that, just from a slightly more northerly point. We'll move quickly on to the next one, and that is the site from Dasket Hill. This actually shows not only what we'd seen before in terms of the landscaping with a little bit of a gap in it, but then this is another whole row of complete landscaping. So it's really a kind of double field buffer before the units are located. And then the next one, this is from a further southerly point at the bottom of the hill. And the next one is actually showing the really good landscaping along the eastern part of the site at Dasket Hill. The next one, I have jumped about a little bit here, so apologies for that, is just another view of the site from the bottom of Dasket Hill. And this is probably about 325 metres to the north of the site. So this is probably one of the kind of closest public views that you could get at this point. But as I've noted, the landscaping that you can see in terms of the field boundary there to the north is not the only field boundary. There will be two at this point. So the next one, we're moving back up to the 30 mph limit I'd pointed out before. And then the following one is the roundabout at Cornborough Road and Dasket Hill. And you're seeing the really good landscaping towards the south and the east of the site at that point. The next one is just another better view of that. And that's where the pedestrian link will take pedestrians out to. And the next one is just looking down towards the residential properties on the left-hand side and the site on the right-hand side. And then what I think might be the final one is just looking back towards the southern and western boundaries of the site. So the western boundary, although it'll be supplemented, it does benefit from further landscaping along Cornborough Road as well. And I think I think that is it for the photograph. So if we could just go back to the aerial map, that would be brilliant. In terms of consultation responses, we have, as detailed in the report on the late pages, had quite a number of objections to the scheme, including from the Parish Council, and those have been summarised and available for members to read in full on the electronic file. So just going into the principle of the scheme, as we've detailed in the report, it's considered to be acceptable in principle in accordance with policies SP8 tourism and SP1 occupancy restriction of the radial plan, local plan strategy. We feel it would contribute to the tourism offer in the area without an unacceptable visual intrusion and impact upon the character of the locality, as we'll discuss further. As detailed in the report, all occupancy will be subject to strict conditions, ensuring it's not anybody's main place of residence and that no stay is longer than 31 days. Some of the incoming responses have highlighted that it's believed there's sufficient holiday provision within the village and concerns that this lies beyond the village development limits. And we do acknowledge that we have considered that, but policy SP8, which is the tourism policy, remains supportive in principle of new development in what we consider the wider open countryside outside of development limits. The loss of agricultural land is noted, but we would highlight that approvals already been secured here for holiday use, and the nature of policy support for tourism doesn't preclude the use of agricultural land for such a development. The warden's accommodation, which is a new aspect of this application, is considered in these site-specific circumstances to align with the requirement for new housing in policy SP2, and that really does have benefits, including securing an on-site management presence, and that's welcome due to the proximity of the nearby residential properties, and that would be fully conditioned as well to be tied to the running of the business. As I'd noted, the shop element of the previous scheme and the original proposal as part of this scheme has been removed by the applicant and agent due to the strong feeling in the local community, because we do note it had been previously allowed. Then moving on in terms of character and form, this is something that we have very carefully considered, and we do feel that it's now considered acceptable in terms of its character impacts and the design. Subject to the strict conditions that we've recommended, it can be delivered without harm to the surrounding wider landscape. As we've noted, it is now for 24 smaller holiday units and 1 warden's dwelling and 1 reception building, compared to the 16 larger holiday units and reception shop building in the same location. We don't feel it contributes to the overdevelopment of the site, and it is noted that the units themselves, by virtue of their smaller footprint and their pitched roofs and lower roof heights, it would result in less massing of development with much less significant areas of glazing than the previous scheme. It is considered that these are acceptable in terms of form and design and positioning. Members have been able to view the specification that I've referenced on the late pages. And I have seen quite a number of holiday units over the last number of years, and I do feel like what has been proposed does relate to a higher quality installation in terms of the visual appearance. In terms of the previously submitted landscape and visual impact assessment, I won't repeat this in full. I have reviewed this in sections 10.15 to 10.18 of the officer's report. But the officers are content that in these site-specific circumstances and the additional proposed planting, particularly to the north and west, that the scheme can be delivered suitably. The nearest views are really the ones that we've looked at in the photographs that are sort of 285 to 300 metres to the north. We have gone through the level of existing landscaping and how that can also be supplemented. Together with the layout of the units, which is, on the plan, which is just the next plan, you wouldn't be seeing all 24 units in one swoop. It's the kind of placed behind one another, placed behind one another, placed behind one another approach. And that does help to sort of limit the impact of them. But we do feel that the proposed landscaping and the distances will mean that there would be very little impact from those wider views. So yes, along the northern boundary, the infill planting would include instant hedge and 18 additional heavy standard native species, and they'd be at heights between 2 metres and 4.25 metres. This would be controlled by condition. Furthermore, there'll be 14 new trees along the western boundary of the site. There's also a full condition relating to lighting to ensure that what is proposed will be appropriate in this location. And there's also a tree protection condition to ensure that all the existing landscaping that we've been able to appreciate from the photographs and the visit will be retained and not impacted by the development. We also have concluded that this wouldn't result in any material adverse impacts upon the adjoining Howarding Hills National Landscape Area. So then just moving on to residential amenity, as I've covered in the report, there was a noise impact assessment submitted, which our environmental health team reviewed as part of this scheme. And there is a new acoustic fence now proposed to the southern boundary of the site, which wasn't originally provided. A noise management plan has been suggested by the acoustic consultants, which will be secured by condition. This is an approach that we have undertaken successfully in other sort of holiday sites in the area. And again, I would just highlight the benefits of the warden's accommodation. The environmental health team have no objection, and we do believe that subject to the relevant conditions, that it wouldn't result in any material harm in terms of residential amenity. Then moving on to drainage, foul water is proposed to go to the main sewers in the village, which is the most sustainable approach. As soakways aren't suitable at this site, there is a surface water attenuation pond. And I would just highlight that all drainage consultees, that includes the Lead Local Flood Authority, the Internal Drainage Board and Yorkshire Water, are content, and they've recommended compliance conditions as they're satisfied with everything that's been provided to date. In terms of highways, this is an aspect that's come up within some of the letters of objection. There have been very detailed technical transport documents submitted as part of the scheme, and the highways team have confirmed no objections subject to conditions, and that will be securing the appropriate access and verge crossing and securing visibility displays. There is a construction management plan submitted, and that would also be conditioned. So just by way of conclusion, we do feel that this scheme is acceptable in principle subject to the recommended conditions. The holiday use has already been established here, and it is considered that this scheme with a slightly lower footprint of new development, although a higher number, remains acceptable. We've carefully considered this in terms of character, form and landscaping, and on balance it's found to be acceptable subject to the recommended conditions. It's also considered acceptable in terms of the setting of the village, the conservation area and the scheduled ancient monument of Sheriff Hutton Castle. As I've noted, highways are content, and we also have had positive responses in terms of drainage, ecology and archaeology. So the scheme is therefore the recommendation is one of approval. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you very much, Neve. We do have two speakers, so I will invite them forward. Mrs. Penny Bean, who's the chair of the parish council. Do you want to speak? You're not speaking on this one. Sorry, Penny, it was you down. No, that's fine. And the applicant, Mr. Mark Simmons. Mr. Simmons, come forward and take a seat, please, sir. The green button at the bottom will switch your microphone off, and you've got 3 minutes.
Good morning and thank you. Thank you for your time today and allowing us the opportunity to make a brief presentation. I'd like to commend the officer's report. I'd like to commend the officer's presentation. Very thorough, balanced, very fair. We're seeking full planning permission to allow the siting of 24 holiday lodges and the associated development as set out. We feel it is of significant material weight that a similar scheme, albeit 16 lodges, was previously approved and is still extant. We consider that being located within the open countryside is entirely appropriate for tourism development. It's policy compliant. The National Planning Policy Framework supports such development. Within walking distance of the village shop, public house and cafe, we feel this is a sustainable site. I would like to say that I have brought my personal holiday short this week to be here today with how the dates fell. We've been staying on an established site in Lincolnshire on the coast. In 3 days, we used the local shop, pub and restaurant and the shopping centre in the nearest town. And we've put a substantial amount of money into the local economy. That's one family on a 3-day break. The economic benefits can be significant and long-lasting from tourism development. This site is well screened with existing landscape. Supplementary planting and landscaping is proposed. The site is within flood zone 1, the preferable location for all development, including tourism. We've worked closely with the council, particularly with the planning officer, to provide amended plans and additional documents and technical information as required. There were no objections from environmental health, ecology, archaeology, highways, the drainage board or the lead local flood authority, subject to conditions. A noise assessment was carried out and acoustic fence will be provided. Detailed drainage documents have been provided. The local highway authority confirmed that subject to the imposition of a condition, the proposed development would not result in a harmful impact upon access or highway safety, and this accords with policy SP20 of the local plan. The site has been carefully considered in terms of the impact of the setting of the village, proximity to the conservation area, and the scheduled ancient monument of Sheriff Hutton Castle. We note that the officers find there's no harm, no material unacceptable harm to any of those heritage assets. There would be benefits from the development. I would like just to pick up on one point that thank you. The previous item, I was listening very carefully. I can confirm that for this particular development, the applicant will be running it personally themselves. They're investing their money into the site, quite significant sums of money to bring forward a high quality development, and they will diligently ensure that conditions are all complied with to the utmost. In conclusion, I would like to ask respectfully for committee to show their support and support this application in line with the officer's recommendation. Thank you very much.
Right, I'll open it up for questions. Councillor Knapp.
Yeah, thank you, Chairman. Just so I'm completely clear on this, obviously there's the existing application that's been granted for 16 lodges. That original application, am I right in thinking it didn't include a warden's house, and it didn't include, it didn't include a shop? It did include a shop. That's right. Sorry, yeah, I meant that. That's right. So it did include a shop, didn't include a warden's house. That's right. Thank you, Chairman. That's just a clarification I needed.
One of your pictures, it showed that the splay seems to have been developed since we had the site visit. Is that now in accordance with condition 11?
I think the photographs were taken. I think it was before we did the site visit. I know it was. I think it was, the site visit was quite distracting, if you remember, with the there is some manure being handled at that time.
So
but
I guess the question is that splay as shown in the photograph suitable for condition 11 or not at this moment in time?
I would.
Yeah.
I think it's likely that it will have been developed in accordance with the necessary splay. It does look more developed than I've seen it in the past. I think logically they would have done it to the requisite requirements. They did also discharge the relevant conditions as part of the original application to be able to start the development. So I think that may be the indication of the lawful start happening.
I just want to clarify so that it's really, really clear. So because the original application was approved, the principle of development is already established. What we're now being asked to consider is an increase in the number of units with some slight tweaks. So we lose the shop, we've got an ordnance bungalow, but effectively the principle of development is established and accepted.
Yes, that's correct. And I do believe the lawful start has been made as well. But if it hadn't, they would have up until November to be able to do so. And they have discharged all the pre-commencement conditions. So there'd be nothing to stop that occurring.
Councillor Knapton.
Oh, sorry, we're not in debate yet. Okay. Yep. So it's an interesting one, really, because having had the Easing War one beforehand, obviously on a much smaller scale, obviously this is very different. One is there's an existing the existing permission, which obviously, as you said, Chairman, the principle of development has already been agreed. So in my mind, what does this development offer as opposed to the extant one, which could be implemented tomorrow? So in this application, we lose the shop. Now that's really important because when you're away on holiday, you do spend money in the shop. And if it was on site, I think you would just go to the on-site shop, which I would imagine would be quite comprehensive. In this case, you're going to walk down to the village and spend your money in the shop. So that's a real positive. The warden, that's a real positive because I come back to the Easingwell development and the lack of what I believe would be control. Well, you know, a warden will control that site. So again, that is a benefit. Yes, there's more units, but on a smaller footprint, but it will mean more traffic movements in and out. So there are pros and there are cons. When you're looking at the benefits of tourism to the local economy, I sort of do feel that that shop is an important issue. And if I can believe that the existing permission will deliver a shop there and this one won't, then I think that's a strong argument to move to this application, to grant this application and do away with the shop. So I think I had a question now, is that if we approve this application, is the previous application withdrawn? Is the previous permission withdrawn, changed to this, or do both permissions exist side by side? Sorry, I just come to that question.
Thank you for the question. Yeah, if this was approved today, both would remain sort of open and available for development. But I believe it's the applicant's intention, by virtue of submitting this application, this is the one they really want to go for. But obviously there would be that ability. We can double check that. I can see the Yeah, there is also just one other clarification that I'd love to be able to make at this point. Whenever we'd talked about the warden's accommodation last time, there was a warden's unit, but that had a reception. Within that was the site shop and a kitchenette and a store and a WC. So it was a warden's unit, but it wasn't a residential warden's unit. And that's just the distinction I want to make at this time. Hopefully that helps.
Well, sorry, just to come back on that. Sorry, so in this case, the difference warden-wise would be the warden would be there potentially 24/7, but in the past, the warden would have lived elsewhere and come in and opened up on the morning, that sort of thing. So if something kicked off at midnight under this application, more likely there would be a member of staff on site than under the previous application. Thank you.
Councillor Cross.
Thank you, Chair. I was quite happy to accept 16 last time on this small site, but I think now what we're looking at is cleared over development on the site. You know what I mean? We're going to see a lot more traffic movements around this village. As can be seen, the residents have made strong objections to it. There is plenty of holiday accommodation locally. And I think, you know what I mean, you've had the application, you've got it asked for 16, you've got 16, deliver the 16. You know, it's fairly straightforward, you know, increasing it by over 50%. What we're going to have come here in 2 months' time and say, can we have 36? Let's have another 50%. We see it time and time again on the coast where they put developments in and then they keep it increasing them, and they make it far less attractive, the sites. You know what I mean? Let's make it pleasant. There's plenty of holiday accommodation here. And, you know what I mean? I will be voting in favour of it. Thank you, Chair.
Councillor Jabbar.
Thank you, Chair. I was simply going to point out the improvements that we've seen this time versus last time in terms of the shop and the warden's lodge. But I also wanted to highlight the point that the assurance that the applicant has just given us in response to the query about the current application versus the previous one, and the confirmation that it is the new application that the development will be established according to. And I just wanted to make that absolutely clear for the record.
Anyone else? I very much accept that the principle of development has been established. There are, as Councillor Napton indicated, benefits to this changing scheme. So we now have a permanent warden on site. We no longer have the shop element, which was causing concern in the village, and the local shop is very adequately provisioned to be able to service a holiday park of this nature. I won't lie, I am disappointed with a 50% increase in the number of units, although the footprint is no bigger than what was had, I believe, with the 16 units, which I think were 3-bedroomed. Shall I carry on while you're, yeah. So we're looking at an increase of 8 units, which ostensibly means 8 more cars, maybe at worst 16 more cars if you said two cars per unit. It's not ideal, but I think it's copable with. And like I say, the default position is 16 units, and it has benefits in its current form. So I don't believe anybody's moved it for approval. So I will move from the chair. Councillor Napton, were you going to second?
Yes, I mean, on balance, and I think exactly what you said. I mean, I'm not jumping up and down about it, about the additional 8 units, but removing the shop and making a provision for a 24-hour warden, I just think that it outweighs the damage of those 8/16 cars is outweighed by the economic benefits to the village and the village shop and the pub, etc., and also the provision of having that warden there is, I think, a real benefit, and so that's why I would second it, Chairman.
Thank you very much. Neve, did you want to come back?
Yeah, I could just clarify. The previous scheme for 16 had 6 2-bedroom units, 6 3-bedroom units, and 4 4-bedroom units. Thank you.
Thanks for that. Right, members, we've got a proposal to approve the application. It's been proposed and seconded. Can I ask you to indicate what your preferences are? Either for, we'll vote for first. Okay. Thank you. Anyone against? Thank you. So that's 4 votes for, 1 against, and I'll leave that to the officers to do whatever needs to be done with regard to issuing approvals, etc. Thank you very much. Thank you, everybody. Just before we move into the next agenda item, does anybody need a comfort break? Okay. 5 minutes. the next item on the agenda, item 7, which is application number 22/00102 full. This is a change of use of land to a gypsy and traveller site for 4 number family pitches, each with 1 number static caravan, 1 number touring caravan, 1 number day room and amenity block and parking spaces, together with the installation of 1 number biodisc treatment plant and associated landscaping on land at Cornborough Road in Sheriff Hutton. We do have 3 speakers on this item, and I'll call you forward once we've had the presentation from the officer, and each speaker will have 3 minutes. So is it you, Jill? Thank you, Jill.
Thank you, Madam Chairman. Members may recall that this is the first of 2 applications on the agenda which relate to this site. This first application is for the change of use of the land for the creation of a private gypsy and traveller site for 4 pitches to meet the needs of 1 extended family. The family are living on the site, and although formal pitches have not been laid out, the application does cover some retrospective elements. That includes a package treatment plant and surfacing. The second related application on the agenda relates to an existing building on the site. Members will recall that the application for the change of use of the land was considered at the March meeting of this committee following a site visit. The report on the agenda, the report that's in front of you today, is an updated version of the report that was considered by the committee in March. We have received 1 further representation that just missed the late pages. I believe members have a copy of that. No, okay. I'll quickly summarise it. It's from a member of the public. I won't read it out verbatim, but in summary, it says that the parish council has submitted an extensive list with valid reasons for refusal. We object to the application. NYC have a duty to provide accommodation for the travelling community, but please be aware that to approve this scheme would cost NYC a substantial amount of money, more than it would to refuse it. That's an implication that the reference as a cost to providing public services and facilities that the residents would need, and the comments just end on please do not ignore the local residents, representative and parish council's views on this matter. Chairman, I would just say that they are all summarised quite comprehensively in the main body of the report. Certainly all the material planning considerations are covered in the report. So at the March meeting, you may recall that members did raise some concerns about the landscape impact of the proposed pitch arrangement and the proposed community amenity building and the extent of the arrangement across the site and the field. I think it's fair to say that in considering the application in March, the committee didn't question the family's need or personal circumstances information provided in support of the application. The applicant has considered the concern raised by members, and to reduce landscape and visual impact, the communal amenity building is removed from the scheme, and that's been replaced by 4 smaller day room buildings, 1 for each pitch. The applicant has considered moving and changing the pitch layout so that we're closer to the existing building on the site, but the current position is the sort of the flattest area of this land, and it remains his preference that the pitches are located there. So in essence, the broad location of the pitches hasn't changed. I think that some members here today were able to attend the site visit in March. Before I summarise the main issues and the recommendation, I think it's probably a useful point to look at the photographs of the site to remind members of the site and to be of assistance to any member who wasn't at the site visit. So if we could just start the slides. Thank you. So the red star is the site in relation to the local area. So you'll see the main built-up area of Sheriff Hutton, probably about half a mile to the east, and the site is just to the south of the Cornborough Road. You'll also see the nearest sort of residential properties to the site. So Mount Pleasant Farm to the north is about about 45 metres to the north, and two existing residential properties to the west. I think there's also a permission for a further residential property in that building group to the west, which is about 250 metres from the site. Just move on to the next slide. So this just gives you an indication of the extent of the land within the applicant's ownership and the application site. So the red line on superimposed on that land is the application area for the pit. The rest of the land that's owned by the applicant. So there's approximately about 2 hectares of paddock below the application site. Just to point out that along the because this is probably the best place to raise it, along the southern boundary of that section of blue land is a public right of way. You'll see from that side the access to the site from the Cornborough Road. And you can also see the location of an existing building that has a planning history. Originally planning permission was granted for an agricultural building there. That is existing on the site, some hard standing around it. So the field between that building and the rest of the red line to the west is the field which the pitches are proposed to be located. The strip running on the east and west sort of a line to the south of the building is a section of land where the applicant intends to relocate his chicken huts. They're currently on the field proposed for the pitches. Could just move on to the next slide, and that's just the current block plan proposals showing the 4 pitches in a square arrangement to the west of the existing agricultural building and hard standing. So what you will see between that pitch arrangement and the western boundary of the site within the applicant's ownership is an area that's got on that plan dog exercise area. That relates to the second application on this agenda. So it's outside the red line area of this application, but effectively there is open field between the proposed pitches and the western boundary of the land within the applicant's ownership. Just move on to the next slide. So this photograph is taken looking in a westerly direction from the Cornborough Road. You can just see in the middle of the screen behind the tree the roof line of the existing building on the site. And to the right hand side of the picture is Mount Pleasant Farm, which is to the north of Cornborough Road and the site. Move on to the next. This is just another picture from the Cornborough Road looking across to the site and the existing building on the site. And this picture is taken looking eastwards. Again, you can see the building on the site just on in the middle of the screen. This picture is taken from the access to the site looking in an easterly direction. The access to Mount Pleasant Farm is just visible there on the left-hand side of the picture. Next picture. This is as you get into the entrance of the site. This is the access road down to the existing building, which runs sort of parallel east-west direction, parallel with the Cornborough Road. So you can see the existing building there and the family's existing vehicles and caravans, and it's literally the field that you can see to the right of the fencing there is in effect where the pictures will be laid out. This is just taken from outside the existing building on the site, looking in a sort of southwesterly direction. You can see the existing chicken huts in the field, and that's the broad location for the 4 pitches. That's just looking across from the south of the application area, looking across towards the building, again, across the area of land that would be laid out for the pitches. And that's from a similar vantage point looking north towards Mount Pleasant Farm, which is sort of behind the trees in the far top right-hand corner of the picture. This is taken from outside the existing building, looking directly south. So you can see the hedge line at the bottom of the lower paddock area. This is just a picture of some of the existing caravans on the site. Again, looking towards Mount Pleasant Farm. You can just see the chimney pots from Mount Pleasant Farm in the distance. This picture is taken from the south of the location of the existing building on the site, and it's looking directly west. So that's the strip of land where it's proposed that the chicken huts would be relocated to. It's also in that location that the package treatment plant is located, and you can see in the distance there the properties that are located to the west. This picture's taken at the very southern extent of the land within the applicant's ownership, so beyond the actual application area, and it's taken from the south eastern corner of the site, adjacent to the public right of way, looking up in a northerly direction. So that's again what you can see at present. The existing caravans that you can see there on the area of hard standing that's around the existing building, and you can see the area of the field where the chicken huts are that the pitches would be sited. That's taken from the other end. Sorry, that's another picture looking in the same direction, just panning round slightly. And that is a picture that's taken from the other side, the sort of the southwestern edge of the area that's owned by the applicant. That's the boundary of the land within his ownership, not the boundary of the application area. He has an access. There is a field access down the western boundary of his land, and again looking across to the properties in to the west of the site and the land within its ownership. Again, that's taken from the public right of way at the southwest of the site, looking back across towards the application area. That's just taken from further within the site, so the top of the paddock, looking across towards the proposed area. So what you get a sense of there is where the existing building is, where the pitches will go. That's where the chicken huts are. An area of grassland that is effectively won't be developed for anything, and then the field access track on the other side of this little post and wire fencing that runs parallel with the western boundary. That just gives you a visual picture of what I've just tried to explain. If we move on to the next site, this is just taken from the edge of the application area, looking in a sort of southeasterly direction. And this picture's taken from the road, and I'm not sure what the name of the road is actually, but it's the road that runs between Sheriff Hutton Bridge across towards Stillington. Is it Moxby Lane? Yeah, Moxby Lane, looking directly up towards the site. So I would say that from that picture, the caravans that are currently on the site are just about visible with the naked eye. So if you see in the field directly in front, there is a pile of manure. Directly above that, there is a tree, and slightly to the left of that is the site. So, you know, just about visible with a naked eye from distance views. And I think that's the last of the pictures. Thanks, Nikki. The application raises a range of issues and is the subject of objections. These are summarised in the report. We've received some letters of objection which we haven't been published online because of the nature of the material, but all of the material considerations in objection to the proposal are included in the report. Madam Chairman, there are no technical issues, highways or drainage that would prevent or constrain the proposed use of the land. The key issue in this case relates to the principle of developing the site for the proposed use against the context of current national policy, which clearly advises local planning authorities that new traveller sites in the open countryside should be strictly limited. In this respect, the report details the development plan policies and the material planning considerations, including national policy, that are relevant to the determination of the application and that need to be weighed in a planning balance. National policy is clear that local planning authorities are expected to meet the need which arises in their area and to have effectively an up-to-date needs assessment. An up-to-date needs assessment for the area does exist. It clearly identifies a need for additional pitch provision in the former Rydale area of North Yorkshire. This includes short-term requirements that will not be addressed through the new development plan, given the projected preparation time. So there is a quantitative need that realistically can only be met through the planning application process. It's also worth noting that the authors of the needs assessment have advised the local planning authority that public sites may not be the most appropriate or realistic way of meeting the needs of some traveller households. And as outlined in the report, the Sykes family illustrate this point. Notwithstanding this, in terms of alternative provision, there are currently 2 vacant pitches at Tara Park, but housing officers have applications for those. They're processing applications at the minute, and it's anticipated that they will be let imminently. The identified need for additional pitches and the lack of alternative sites is considered to weigh in favour of the application. The personal circumstances of the applicant and his family are referred to in the report and have weighed in the planning balance. Members are aware that under national policy, personal circumstances are a material consideration in the planning process for gypsies and travellers. The report summarises the information outlining the personal circumstances of the family. The document is not available publicly, and members will recall that in March it was considered by members in a closed session. I think if members feel the need to read this information again, it's considered that this would need to be in a closed session before the application is debated. So the family's personal circumstances have weighed in my recommendation, and for that reason, members will note that the recommendation is essentially for a personal permission, which is specific to the current adults of the family group. Members will note from the report that the applicant and agent have questioned the need for such a condition and have raised concerns that, in essence, it limits the use of the site and is an interference with their human rights. Chair, the personal circumstances have been used to justify this application, and they are integral to the application that is in front of us. It's not an application that's been made for a general traveller site. And it's for these reasons that it's considered that a condition is necessary and it's acceptable within the context of human rights. The scale of the development proposed is considered to meet the requirements established by the development plan, and that's policy SP5. And national policy, and then it's not considered to dominate the nearest settled communities. In this case, that's Sheriff Hutton itself and the hamlet of Cornborough. Neither does it place undue pressure on local infrastructure. It's considered that in a location which provides to be located in a location which provides reasonable access to local services and community facilities, which is required by development plan policy as well as national policy. The pitches as proposed include standard facilities and space which would facilitate good quality living accommodation. Again, this is a criteria that's required by the development plan. It's also considered that development can be accommodated without an unacceptable impact on the residential amenity of neighbours, which again is another consideration in terms of policy SP5. Whilst the site is relatively well screened from public vantage points to the north, the proposed development will be visible from the public right-of-way to the south. The proposal would impact on the prevailing landscape character and result in a visual impact. This harm, as considered, would be mitigated in time by the combination of perimeter landscaping proposals to the pitches themselves, the application site area, and to the boundary of the field paddock to the south, immediately in front of the public right-of-way. I think it's probably also worth bearing in mind that if the applicant wanted to, he could plant on this land and screen the whole site from view of the public right of way, if he wanted to, or if he was asked to. I would just like to take the opportunity to reiterate the legal duties of the LPA, which are covered in section 6 of the report. The family are Romani Gypsies, which are an ethnic group and have protected characteristics under the Equality Act. Amongst a number of other matters, you have a duty to take steps to meet the needs of people with certain protected characteristics where these are different from the needs of other people. In addition, in terms of legislation to protect children, the best interests of the child shall be a primary consideration in all decisions made. I would suggest that there's probably no greater consideration in the planning balance. Chairman, in considering the application against the policies of the development plan and all the material considerations, it's considered that the benefits of the proposal outweigh the limited harm to the landscape. And the recommendation is outlined in the report. Chairman, I would just say that if members are minded to approve the application, I'd suggest perhaps another condition that deals specifically with gates to the pitches, and conditions 14 and 15 are sort of duplicating themselves. They both relate to drainage. We'd need to rationalise that. Thank you, Chairman. The recommendation is as outlined.
Thank you very much, Jill. Very comprehensive. There are 3 speakers, so I'm going to invite Mr. Hamilton to come forward first to present his case. Mr. Hamilton, please do take a seat. It's the green button on the microphone that you need to enact, and you have 3 minutes, and I will give you a warning when you've got 30 seconds left. Sorry.
Just good afternoon. I would remind the committee that 77 members of the public have objected in writing to the proposal, with no member of the public supporting it. I trust that the committee will take full account of all those comments which still stand and which demonstrate the strength of local feeling against this proposal. The main objections are: the site is an intentional unauthorised development in open countryside, which the council should have previously used its enforcement powers to have removed. The applicant is seeking to establish this illegal development as a permanent site in perpetuity, not just for his own family. There are potentially alternative specialist traveller sites with full facilities available in the local area where the applicant and his family could live without affecting the local countryside. There have been numerous complaints from local residents, particularly about noise. However, the planning officer's report states that there will be no loss of amenity to neighbours. How is this conclusion reached when the complaints have never even been investigated? The planning law, as for all laws, should apply equally to all individuals. The applicant has fundamentally ignored planning laws and constraints that apply to other citizens. The planning officer's report is considered to be biased and discriminatory against the objectors. The officer has held meetings and discussions with the applicant, but has not extended the same courtesy and consideration to the objectors and their concerns. The application should therefore be rejected. If, however, the council is still minded to approve the application, the following conditions should be applied. Approval should be for short-term temporary occupancy only. The planning officer's case for recommendation is heavily weighted on the personal circumstances of the applicant and his family, in particular the children. Any approval should therefore be strictly time limited to a maximum, say, 5 years, to allow the children attending Sheriff Hutton Primary School to complete their education. The committee should seek further current evidence from the school on this issue. A temporary approval would allow time for the council to develop and implement a proper policy for any new permanent traveller accommodation which may be required in the county. There are no technical reasons why the proposed amenity blocks have to be built in brick. They can be constructed as timber buildings or as portable mobile units
30 seconds.
which can be subsequently removed. After the expiry of the temporary occupancy, the applicant must be required to remove all structures and return the site to its original undeveloped condition. The associated proposal is for a dog breeding kennels and a dog exercise area. Dogs from the site have run loose on neighbouring farmland. Some have been hit and killed by cars. This raises serious concerns, and a primary requirement of any approval must be that the council requires the applicant to obtain the necessary dog breeding licence and fulfil all the conditions in the statutory guidance for local authorities.
I'm sorry, so you've reached your time.
Yes, thank you. Thank you.
Right, it's showing a red light. Okay. Yeah, thank you. Firstly, I would like to express the Parish Council's utter disgust at the way this application has been dealt with administratively. Blunders were encountered way back in March regarding notification of a site meeting and planning meeting. At the following planning meeting, points were raised resulting in deferment of the decision for further discussion with Mr. Sykes' agent. At our June Parish Council meeting, notification of a planning meeting at which this application was to be discussed was tabled, which it was assumed by the parish clerk and most parish councillors was a follow-up to the previous deferment. At that point, we had no reason to believe otherwise. However, one parish councillor pointed out that as an objector in a personal capacity, he had received notification of a revised application which covers various serious amendments which would have severe detrimental impact on our community should it be passed. The parish council had not received this notification, therefore it had not been circulated to councillors and was not on the agenda for discussion. Thus, we were unable to make any comments prior to the proposed planning meeting. On following this up, our parish clerk was informed that the parish council had been omitted from the distribution list. How can this happen? The parish council is a vital consultee, especially on such a sensitive application as this. The number of objections from residents demonstrates just how much this means to the parish. The parish clerk duly received notification of the revised application, which showed major changes to the previous application, necessitating our request for additional time to enable it to be discussed at our July meeting and our objections submitted. Sheriff Hutton Parish Council has no confidence whatsoever in the planning department. If this application is passed in accordance with the recommendations, who is going to police it to ensure the conditions are adhered to, e.g. that only the Sykes family will be occupying the site and that no commercial activities will be carried out? Is it expected that the Parish Council police it and refer any contraventions to the planning department? If so, will anything be done? All the works that have been done on this site so far have been done without planning permission. These have been reported to the planning department on several occasions, and despite many approaches, nothing has been done about it. Commercial activities are already taking place.
30 seconds.
Tree surgery business being one of them, blatantly advertised on a pickup driving around the area. Can we be assured that the condition about no commercial activities is taken into consideration when discussing the planning application for the dog breeding business? Thank you.
And the final speaker is the agent, Mr. Mennell. Mr. Mennell, would you like to come forward and take a seat for us? I think the microphone is still on. You've got 3 minutes, Mr. Mennell.
Thank you. It's on red at the minute. Can you hear me? Right, good afternoon, Chair and members. Following the meeting on the 21st of March 24, I have had further discussions with both Mr. Sykes and the Council's delegated planning officer, Jill Thompson. From the last meeting, the proposal was generally accepted in principle, with certain issues to be given further consideration. Those issues were the visual impact of the proposal, the design and permanence of the communal amenity building, together with the landscape impact. You will note that the original proposal amenity building has been removed from the scheme, and each individual pitch has now its own small amenity building in accordance with the government's publication, Designing Gypsy and Traveller Sites. Each pitch is of standard design, which is accepted by local authorities throughout England. Each individual amenity building is a day room consisting of a toilet, a shower, laundry facilities and domestic storage. Following the concerns of the visual impact, the site is separated from Cornborough Road, the nearest viewing point, by existing tall, dense native hedging, which will be retained. The other public viewing point is the public footpath, which runs along the southern boundary of the applicant's land, a field away from the application site. Mr. Sykes has previously planted up to 4,000 hedges and trees along the exposed boundaries, which are now up to 1 metre in height and will reduce all visual impact from the footpath. The traveller site of 4-number family pitches is relatively small, where the alignment and closeness of each pitch is designed to reduce spatial awareness by each individual pitch having native hedge planting, which will reduce its visual impact from outlying areas. There are very few visual vantage points and any from elevated locations, which will be minimal. The static caravans will be screened with hedge planting around individual pitches, which will soften the appearance of the caravans, and the smaller amenity blocks will help assimilate the site within its surroundings. The nature of the development site does not itself create an adverse effect on character and appearance of the area. Indeed, the PPTS and the local planning policy acknowledges that such sites as this can be located in the countryside. It is also noteworthy that the appearance of the caravans in the wider landscape is not an unfamiliar feature, with both caravan sites and individual caravan pitches throughout the countryside and around Sheriff Hutton. The nature of the applicant's amended development as a Romany Gypsy site, the loss of openness in visual terms would be very limited and outweighs the council's shortfall of available council pitches, including its insufficient resources to meet the criteria of the GTAA, gives weight towards the support of the planning committee.
30 seconds.
The consequence of a refusal of my client's planning application would leave his family homeless and the family having to find alternative schooling and medical practices. The council committee should be minded of its duties under the Equality Act 2010 and the Children and Families Act 2014. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Mr. Mennell.
Okay.
Right. I'll open it up for questions. Councillor Baker.
That's the planning application, planning meeting where we heard this originally. I did ask if a condition could be put on that the fencing round the site was dog proof to stop dogs going off the site onto adjoining farmland. I don't know if that had been addressed.
We can put a condition on to include it. I'm sorry if I've missed it from the last meeting. Clearly, there is we've got 2 application sites here, so I think that's something that might need to be repeated on the other. But yes, we can address that.
Anybody, any other questions? Can I ask, and it was one of the reasons we deferred last time, and I accept and I'm grateful that the bigger amenity block has gone, but one of the concerns that we had was the units being so far out into the open countryside, and I don't see any change to that situation. And I take on board what you say about the levelness of the site, but I don't see any movement on changing the amount of land which is now exposed to a different use than open countryside.
I think you're correct that that in that respect it hasn't changed too much. So I think what the applicant is looking to do for his family is create pitches which, like many gypsy and traveller sites up and down the country, whether they're public sites or private sites, provide livable accommodation and space. That I don't think that can be achieved by trying to orientate and squeeze those pitches onto the existing sort of area around the existing building. So I think it is, you know, that's why they're going out into the field. But I think it's probably just useful if we go back to the slides. I think it's probably something like slide 78 or 77, Nikki. Sorry. If you extend visual impact, sizes and going further into the field. So that's just taken, and clearly the most sensitive public vantage point, I would say in this case, given that the site's very well scoped right away to the south. So, you know, from that vantage point, looking across, that's what you see now, and those are the caravans, the vehicles that are around the existing building. So yes, the pictures will come further out into the field. Vantage point, you know, at worst, there's a limited additional visual impact. At best, it's pretty marginal. I think it's softened and mitigated by the fact that all of the pitches will have boundary landscaping, that the interface between the pitches and the stretch of land to the south that the chicken huts will be accommodated on will have boundary landscaping, and there's perimeter landscaping along the boundary in which I'm stood there when I'm taking the picture, you know, in front of the public right of way. As I've said, the paddock, it's about 2 hectares of paddock between the public right of way and the application site. That's all within the applicant's ownership. He literally could do planting which screened the entire site from the public right of way if he wanted to, or if he was required to. I think if we just go back to the last slide before this, Nikki. Sorry, for that one. No, I was looking for the picture that was from the other side of the right of way. That one. So that again is from the other angle, the other end of the public right of way, looking up across the paddock. So what you see there in terms of the extent of the caravans, where the pitches are, it's probably about the same extent again into the field, where you can just see the chicken huts. But as I say, I think that it's a fairly marginal impact from that sensitive public right of way when you take into account the perimeter landscaping.
We'll open it up for debate. Councillor Cross.
Thank you, Chair. It's interesting that what we've had 77 objections from residents of Sheriff Hulton about this application, and the fact that the previous application has been refused. It's outside the village development plan. It's inappropriate in the countryside. It's against national policy. It conflicts with SP20, and I can go on. And I'm very concerned that the lady from the parish council had commented that she'd been ignored by the planning department and in liaison with her. And that does concern me, you know what I mean? Because these parish councils come out and they actually work, you know, as councillors, you know, to help the residents. And 77 people have objected. You know what I mean? This isn't a new site. It's being used currently illegitimately. And it's legalising an illegal occupation of land. Nowhere else could that go on. You know what I mean? And I am concerned that, as the parish council mentioned, no enforcement action was taken. You know what I mean? Because if that would have happened in any of our patches as councillors, we would have objected. And it is great concern to me that, you know, nothing. So as it stands currently, I can't support this application, you know, for the reasons as stated in the report. Thank you, Chair.
Jill, do you want to come back?
Some of the points made. I need to point out to Councillor Cross and to the other members of the committee that you be aware that the number of objections that we get in terms of planning application, not a material planning consideration. It's what is said. It's the material planning considerations that are raised in objection. It's not the number. So just to be absolutely clear on that. There hasn't been an application for a Gypsy and Traveller site refused on this site before. That's incorrect. The family are occupying the site. Yes, it's currently unauthorised, but it's not illegal. They're not in breaching any terms of any enforcement notice or anything like that. It's not an illegal occupation. Just like to come back on the enforcement action point. We have the application in front of us because concerns were raised that the development was unauthorised. It's through the enforcement work that the council does that we seek an application to try and regularise the situation. That's why we have the application in front of us. It's to address the breach of planning control. And I'd just like to come back on the points raised about the parish council. It was very regrettable that when the application, the description changed, that it was in error. The parish council weren't informed of that. But the parish council's position is not and has not been prejudiced. It was deferred at the June meeting in order to give the parish council time to fully consider the changes, which is what they've done, and they've provided those comments. So they're not prejudiced in any way in terms of our administrative process. I think that's covered just about everything. What I would say is that in principle, again, in terms of the development plan, and I have a copy of it here, and in terms of national policy, I've got a copy of it here. It's not in principle in direct conflict with those policies. There are policies that support in national policy that support Gypsy and Traveller provision in the countryside if it's required, if it's demonstrated to be required. And our own policy SP5 provides the criteria against which applications can be determined. It doesn't say that they shouldn't be in open countryside. Thank you.
Councillor Napton.
Yeah, thanks, Chairman. I mean, I'm aware of this site from its first inception. I think it was over a Christmas period. I can't remember, but it was some holiday period when the first pieces arrived on this site, and Rydal Council lost planning control of this site, and that's why we're here today. However, I do understand the needs of the residents that are living there without planning permission. But when I went to the site, there is definitely a need for improvement. However, the hard standing around the existing building is extensive, and when this was deferred, my hope was that the applicant would redraw up the plans and at least make an effort to put some of the pitches onto within the curtilage of the hard standing. When we went on the thing, I asked what were the future plans for the hard standing, and there were none. So it's not as if that hard standing was going to be used once the existing caravans were moved off it. So I can see no reason whatsoever that we should be allowing all 4 pitches to encroach onto the open countryside. National planning policy says that it should be strictly limited, and the applicant has every ability to put maybe 2, maybe 3 of those pitches on the hard standing area, and has failed to come back and do so. The amenity buildings. Well, my hope again was that the amenity building would go, and it has done, but not to be replaced by 4 brick amenity buildings. The hope was that it would be integrated into the existing building to minimise the impact on the open countryside. At every stage now, unfortunately, the applicant was given a second chance in order to minimise the impact, but yet still provide high quality pitches for himself and his extended family, and has failed to do so. And I think the point was well made by Jill at the beginning, is that's his preference. It's his preference. It's not essential to be done that way. He's putting them in the open countryside. It's his preference. He could have put them all closer to the building, or at least 2 or 3 of them, and not displaced not have to displace the chickens. So it's with those matters in mind that I will not be supporting this application, Chairman.
Anyone else? Right. So this is in my division, and it's concerned me greatly. And we deferred it last time because there were issues that we would have liked to have been addressed, not least of which is the development out into open countryside, which has always been my concern. I have no problem with the principle of the development. I have a problem with the amount of land in open countryside that's being used, and I had a problem with the size of the amenity block when it first came forward. I am disappointed that we now have 4 amenity blocks, but my greater disappointment is the fact that we haven't dressed it back so that it doesn't make an impact on the open countryside. And I accept the officer's comments that it's a balance and that they feel that the balance is acceptable. And I'm sorry, it isn't often I take issue with the officers, but I don't feel it's acceptable. We've got a public right of way, and at the moment the site would be very visible from that public right of way, and I accept that there's been some heavy screening, but that's got some time before it will develop into being a useful screen. I look at pages 60 and 61, which is on here, which is the impact on the local countryside, and it's a very open site, and it's demonstrably in the open countryside. And whilst I accept we have a duty to provide pitches and there is a qualitative need for those pitches, it doesn't have to be out in the open countryside like it is now. It is too prominent in the open countryside, and unfortunately, despite the fact that the site is well run, well maintained, and I accept all the reasons under the Human Rights Act that you should be allowed to be there, I can't, in its current form, support the application. And I'm really sorry to say that. I don't know where this is going to go. I'm not prepared to propose it. I'm not prepared to support it in its current form either. So I'm really sorry about that. Councillor Napton.
Yeah, Chairman, can I propose that the application is refused for the reasons that I stated?
Jill.
Thank you, Chair. Yes, could we just have the reason articulated, please?
I believe that it is too great an impact on the open countryside. But I'm going to suggest that actually, rather than go straight to a refusal, that we should perhaps consider defer this again and see if we can. I'll refer to you, Jill, but you know, I've got to be conscious.
Yes, I think, Chairman, I think it's probably best if we resolve that now. I think from what I've heard, this is a single reason for refusal that relates to the impact on the character and appearance of the landscape. So I think a reason for refusal needs to obviously reflect that, but I also think it needs to pick up that members have considered all of the issues in the planning balance, and that in particular, given that there are children on the site and there are personal circumstances of the family, I think we need to articulate that in the reason for refusal. So it's a reason for refusal. I think it's going to read something like the proposed development would result in unacceptable harm to the character and appearance of the landscape, in conflict with policy, I think it's SP 13. In the planning balance, the benefits of the development, including the need for additional gypsy and traveller pitch provision, and the needs and personal circumstances of the family, are not considered to outweigh the harm to the landscape. I think it's important that that you've done that planning balance exercise in coming to your conclusion.
Thanks, Jill. Councillor Napton.
I think I'd also like to reiterate that it's important to understand that there is land available that has already been turned into hard standing, that is not being utilised to minimise this development. And that's my key point, is that, you know, the hard standing area could be used to minimise the impact, and it's not being used. And equally, the existing building could be used to house the amenity facilities, and it's not being used. So, you know, that is land that has already been turned into hard standing that could be used, and that's very important. You know, that is why it was deferred, and that's why then the applicant had a chance to incorporate that into their plans and minimise the impact on the open countryside. And as Jill said, their preference was that they didn't want to do that. So that's where we are.
Jill, do you want to come?
I think it's yes, it's their preference, but it's the application that's in front of members now. I think they have clearly looked at whether they could provide what is in effect standard pitch provision in the area around the building. You know, it's not going to meet the requirements. It's not going to provide the space that they want. But clearly, I think everyone has heard that, you know, in members' view, in doing the balance, you believe that the harm to the landscape is outweighing the benefits of the scheme, which include meeting the needs of the family and the children. I suspect, well, I don't know, I suspect in an appeal situation that we run the risk of that perhaps being unreasonable, given the scale of what is proposed in terms of the incursion into the field, and the fact that landscape harm, or certainly visual impact, can be entirely mitigated by planting.
Councillor Baker.
As we keep on bringing up the children, I am concerned that that hard standing has not got a purpose under the application. And as I think Councillor Cross said about a business operating there, was it? Yeah, it was, or that that hard standing might be used to the detriment of the health and well-being of the children. So if the planning application was moved onto the hard standing for the pictures, it would mitigate that possibility.
It's been moved for refusal. It hasn't yet been seconded. I'm minded to, but I'm not quite there yet. I'm going to ask Jill if she thinks there is any possibility that we can negotiate something different that would allow us to defer the application, or do we accept the fact that we can't accept the incursion into open countryside and we go with a refusal?
I think the applicant needs a decision. I think he has given some thought to what members said in March. This is the application that he wants a decision on, and I think he needs that now. And I think the local community need a decision on the application. I mean, understandable. It is an authorised use of the land, so they do need a decision from yourselves. I think it's likely we will be heading to an appeal. Clearly, there will then be a decision from a planning inspector.
Councillor Cross. Thank you for that, Councillor Cross. Right, members, it has been moved and seconded for refusal. Can we please have a show of hands? That is 5 votes for refusal. Sorry, Jill. Sorry, Mr. and Mrs. Sykes. Yes, the reasons have been articulated. Yeah. Basis. There is little point in going to item 8. Is that right? Or
no, I think we need to consider item 8.
You want to do that?
Yeah,
Okay.
I do. If that's all right. I mean, clearly the report is sets out that the recommendation for the second application is contingent on the decision members have made with this one. But I think we need to go through the reasons why there is a conflict for some of the uses proposed. So yes, in terms of the second application.
Let me just introduce it and then we've got the details. Sorry, Jill, sorry to interrupt. Right, so we're now on item 8, which is application number ZE23/00437 full. Change of use of former agricultural building for use as a small breeds dog breeding kennel, domestic storage together with an extension to the building to provide toilets, external alterations including the installation of insulated acoustic sheeting to the exterior of the building, and that's part retrospective, and change of use of the agricultural land to the exercise area. Again, we do have a speaker on this, and this is the applicant's agent, Mr. Mennell. So, Jill, do you want to do your report?
Yeah.
Thanks.
Thank you, Chair. This application specifically relates to the existing building at the site. It proposes a change of use of that building for use as domestic storage and use as a small breeds dog breeding kennel. It also proposes the extension of the building to provide some toilets. And seeks a retrospective permission for changes to the exterior of the building. That's the metal cladding, and for the change of use of an area of agricultural land to a dog exercise area. The site and building have a history, which is associated with former owners of the site, not the current owner. The permission was granted for an agricultural building on the site in this location in 2013, and although a further application for a timber cabin used in an agricultural workers' dwelling was refused and an appeal was dismissed, former Rydal District Council did take enforcement action to have that cabin removed from the land and to deal with the use of the land and to regularise the clearance of the then agricultural building. In 2020, permission was granted for the use of the building as dog breeding kennels for up to 10 adult dogs. That hasn't been implemented by the then owner at the time or the current applicant, and the permission has lapsed. The applicant is keen to reinstate permission for the dog breeding. Whilst the family are not currently commercial dog breeders, they are considering this as an option for the future. The application also includes the use of the building for domestic storage, and this element of the scheme is related to the proposed use site and wider areas, a gypsy and traveller site under the previous application. Chairman, I would say that the external cladding and proposed extension to the building are acceptable in design terms. And the planning history establishes the principle that dog breeding from the building and the site is in principle acceptable. The EHOs have no objection to the proposed kennel use or the dog exercise area and are confident that with conditions as proposed, potential noise can be acceptable. The issue, of course, now, Chair, is in relation to the proposed domestic storage use. So the report does have a recommendation, but effectively that recommendation is really was contingent on the decision that's been made on the previous application. So in effect, that there is no permission for the wider use of the site for residential use, and therefore the use of this building for domestic storage is actually in conflict with, I would say, policy SP1 of the development plan. It is complicated. We are where we are. We've got 2 applications that have been made and have been changed over time as the applicants and ourselves have tried to address unauthorised development, try to get into a position where we can regularise the situation. So it's not the cleanest of applications. It is, as I say, very much contingent on the application that went before. Just have a quick look at the slides. So the application area for this application includes the existing building and hard standing. The access road down to the building is included within this area, and then there is the section of field to the west and to the west of where the pitches were proposed under the previous application to be used as a dog exercise area. To the next slide. Again, that's just showing a picture of the existing building from looking in a easterly direction, the Cornborough Road. That's the building itself with the cladding. Formerly, I think it was the approved plans were for Yorkshire boarding. The timber cladding has been included. The metal cladding. That's just the western elevation of the building. That is, I think, the southern gable end of the building. I think that's it, Chair. So, Chairman, clearly the recommendation that is in the report is one that, following the previous decision, it's one that we need to reconsider, and members need to consider the application now within the context of the fact that there isn't a planning permission for the wider use of the site for residential use as a traveller site. Thank you. I would just add, Chairman, I know that the residential use of the building, of residential storage, will be an issue in terms of the policy conflict, but I think it would certainly help the applicants and the agent in terms of what they do if they are aware of members' views on the appearance of the building, so the changes that have been made, and the proposed uses of dog kennels. Thank you.
Thank you very much. We do have a speaker, and that's the agent, Mr. Mennell. Mr. Mennell, would you like to come forward again? It's the green button on the microphone stand. You've got 3 minutes to present your case, and I'll give you a warning at 30 seconds left. Thank you.
Just to reiterate really the officer's comments regarding the report. My client would like to keep the building, would like the committee to consider the dog breeding side of things, and obviously part of the storage. The storage now, following the refusal of the caravan park, the storage would be used for more so called domestic, but agricultural machinery for the fields. Obviously he owns all the fields which you can see in the picture there, and which he will need to maintain. So he will need some equipment for that. And so what we're hoping for is that some of the building could be used as as put on the plans on the application can be part dog breeding and part storage. The building in itself is generally an agricultural building and is well screened, and so we think officers can accept that in its own right. There are a lot of these buildings about the area anyway, agricultural type buildings of that form. So that's basically what I'm saying, is that my client would like to utilise the building as it stands, and in principle, the dog breeding kennel is
Mr. Mann,
dog breeding has already been accepted.
Sorry, Mr. Mann, let's just pause. Well,
Sorry.
sorry, can we just pause a minute?
Yeah.
We've stopped the clock. Let's just pause because there's some discussion between the legal and the planning officer. Sorry, we want some time.
I think we were just thinking about what the potential options.
Yeah.
I think
Sorry.
I think it would be very difficult. I think the development description is the development description. It's possible with an amended description that didn't specifically refer to residential storage. Then we could bring a revised application to members with whatever that proposal is. But I think here and now, it's not something that I think we can give a positive answer to. I think it's something that is something that needs to be addressed through a change to the description and a further consultation on the application in terms of anything that's proposed in terms of storage.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
I should say that they want to do bigger one application. That was by applicant will go through the main site. The lab was finalised. That building that's there, I think it's just the period that we have at the same time building something to make plans while it's on site.
Okay.
No, it's complicated, but
Sorry, Mr. Mann, it's complicated, and I don't think it's possible within this meeting to change the description of the application that's come forward for the use of that building. So I think we need to just take that in the balance. I fully expect you to appeal the decision, but we need to consider this bit of this application on its own without muddying the water with an appeal situation. We need to consider what this building means and what the implications are. And I fully accept your position. We're,
we appeal.
Jill, sorry.
I think there is a the options are that we determine the application that's in front of us now, this second application, and then clearly if it's refused, your client will have a right of appeal, and it's likely that then you will be able to appeal both applications. It's probably, I would have expected the planning inspector would look at them both together. The alternative is that this particular application is deferred, the description is changed, and we reconsult on that. I think it's probably cleaner for your client, but it is a matter for your client to get a decision on this application as it stands. I think it's probably just worth saying, members, in terms of what happens next, particularly given that the previous application was refused. clearly we will need to give some thought as to what we do in terms of the unauthorised development. So enforcement action falls under the scheme of delegation. Enforcement report will be written for the head of planning or head of development management to consider, and that will give it the options. And that is either that we issue an enforcement notice. I would fully expect that if we do, there is a long compliance period given to that, given that there are minors on the site. The other option that I think would be covered in that report would be we await the outcome of an appeal to the Secretary of State. So an enforcement report will be drafted. That will look at the various options. We will take legal advice on that, particularly given the circumstances of the family, and that's how we will proceed. But I think it would be we would be expecting that there would be an appeal lodged.
Am I right in understanding, Jill, just so that we get this clarity and it goes into the public domain, that if the applicant does appeal, it stops the clock effectively and they can remain on site?
Yeah, I think we would look to. But they've got 6 months to appeal. I would say that even if we decided to issue an enforcement notice, a compliance period of 6 months is too short a period of time given children on the site. But yeah, we wouldn't look to take steps to remove the family from the site whilst an appeal is pending.
That's great. Thank you very much. Councillor Baker. Yeah, just yeah. Just give me one minute.
If we look at this planning application and agree to uphold the officer's decision, that means the holding something where there would be somebody resident on site that's involved in. So I think that's correct. If we defer it until the result of any subsequent reapplication or result of an appeal, then we can hear it with a residence on site. If we defer it and the appeal is unsuccessful and there's no subsequent application, the applicant may withdraw it and because right. If we go ahead.
It would be 2 appeals, and we've had similar circumstances. We've got similar circumstances at the minute for a different type of development. And what the inspectorate tend to do is look to consider them together. Yeah. What I would say, and Dave's just pointed out that the applications are out of time. The applicant could appeal non-determination if they wanted to in any event.
Councillor Napton.
Thank you, Chairman. I think for the benefit of the applicant, that I would move that we refuse the application on the grounds of domestic storage of domestic paraphernalia storage, because that's the application that's in front of us. And obviously, given that we've refused the previous application, that why would we grant permission for domestic storage? So therefore, we should move to refusal. I think otherwise we're going to ourselves and the applicant are going to be, there's going to be 2 sort of things going on at the same time, which is going to be very messy for all parties. So my thinking is that I would like to see the application refused on the grounds that it allows domestic storage when there's no domestic activity on the site.
Jill's going to come back.
No, thank you. Yeah, and I understand the point about it being messy. It's just the way in which the applications have evolved. In some ways, it would have been a lot cleaner if the residential use of the building was part of the last application. But I think what's important, and you're right, you know, the residential use in the absence of the being permission for the wider site, it would conflict with policy SP1. But I think if and I think that's the reason I'm hearing that the residential storage use is proposed to support the use of the site and the adjacent land within the applicant's ownership as a Gypsy and Traveller site, but it's the planning permission for a Gypsy and Traveller site doesn't exist, and therefore the proposed use of the building for incidental residential storage isn't justified. So that's in conflict with SP1. So I think that's the reason, but I think it's important, certainly for the applicant and the agent, to understand that in terms of the external appearance of the building and the proposed use of the building as a dog kennels, particularly given the history, that's not something that is of concern to members. I think it's important that we deal with that issue as well, so they understand that position.
1 minute, I'm just going to come back on this. So, in principle, I think the cladding of the building is acceptable, and I have no issues with the building and the site of that building. It's already been established through appeal that building can be allowed for agricultural use, and it then changed to use as a dog breeding facility. So I accept that. There is planning history that would support that position, and I've got no issue with that. I accept what you're saying. Without the previous application, it isn't compatible to have storage for residential use, and I accept Mr. Mennell's point about agricultural use for the fields, but that's not what's in front of us. It's got to be we have to determine on what's in front of us. So we can't change that description. But I think in principle, can I ask other members of the committee what they're...
come back as well?
You did have some time left. About a minute, Mr. Mennell, if you can capture it
Just
in a
a question
minute.
to Jill, really. At the end of the day, is it feasible, right, to condition an approval? Should the committee decide to approve it, can we not condition it that the dog kennel part of the application and the building as it stands, its structure, be accepted, and condition that it's not to be used for storage or something of that, so that we've got something out of this application?
I think it's quite a material change to the description and the plans.
So if we I'm thinking we can either defer it and change the description and do it properly, or we just say to the applicant it's not determined.
Well, I think you know, if the applicant wants it to be deferred, so that the description's changed and we reconsult on that, that's something that we can do.
Yeah, so my concern is obviously that if we just simply don't determine it because it's out of time, then the applicant will probably be able to get that determined. Then we'll have an application that gives that is granted, that gives domestic storage without the rest. I just want to do now what's easiest for everybody, including the applicant. So if the applicant is happy that we defer it, then I think we go for deferment. If the applicant isn't happy that we go for defer it, then I would propose refusal.
I think it's what you want a decision on. It's what the applicant wants a decision on. Is it the description of what is proposed now, or is it an amended description that doesn't include residential storage? Because if it is to include residential storage, then I would suggest it's probably better that the application's determined and and appealed.
So what you're suggesting is
well, that is an option. That is an option.
Can I suggest we have yeah, yeah, yeah. Let's do that. Let's have 5 minutes. It's 5 to 1. Let's come back at 1 o'clock. It gives you time to have that discussion. Okay. Yep. Right. Can we re-adjourn? Thank you for your patience. Thank you for your patience. So, right.
Thank you, Chair. Yeah, I've had the opportunity to speak to Mr. Sykes and Mr. and Mrs. Mennell. I think the applicant would like this application to be determined as it stands. I think that's with a view to appealing. Clearly, they will. I think they'll appeal the previous application, and that's likely to be dealt with as a sort of a linked appeal by the planning inspectorate. As I said earlier, officers will need to draft an enforcement report for the head of development management to consider the options. We'll take legal advice as part of that, and that will either be the options are either an enforcement notice or await the outcome of an appeal before an enforcement notice is served. I have to say my preference would be the latter, but clearly all the issues would be addressed in that report. Thank you.
So we've got to. Do you want to finish what you had to say, Mr. Mennell, about the agriculture? No, it's not about the building, the building with the proposal for the dog kennel and the residential storage, because you had about a minute left, Mr. Mennell. I'm very happy if you want to say any more in that minute.
I think, as Jill Thompson has said, I think that we go along with what she said, having discussed it. I am concerned that by a few things, in so much that it's generally an agricultural building, and as you rightly said, in principle, you accept the building as it stands. But we've got nothing to show for that at this stage.
I'm going to open it up for questions. Questions?
Oh, sorry, Jim. I'd already moved it for refusal, and I think that's probably in the best interest of the whole process, given that we can't separate out the domestic, remove the domestic and put agricultural in there at this stage. Completely understandable. And even if we were deferred it and we changed that, the applicant may be left with it would be far too messy. So I think I'm very supportive of us not supporting it.
Anybody, anything else? It needs to be seconded, so I will second that from the chair, but I will caveat that by saying that in principle, the alterations that have been made to the building as it stands, I don't have an issue with. I had a small worry about dog breeding. I'm not a huge, but that's a personal thing, so I'm not going to let that stand as an issue. What I will say is, Councillor Baker, you did ask for a condition about the fencing if round the site, but can we put that in, or because we've asked for refusal?
I think, Chairman, we just note it in that it was part of the discussion and the debate.
Right,
yeah.
That's fine. That's fine. So it's now been moved and seconded for refusal. So can I ask members for their votes for now, please? Okay, so that's 5 votes for refusal. So that's clear. It is refused. Okay, thank you. Thank you very much. Members. I'm going to close the meeting because we're done. There's no other business. I don't have any. So the meeting's closed. Thank you everybody for your attendance and your patience today. Thank you very much.